Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which looks like Beetlejuice is looking to have a solid second weekend with a projected drop of only 56%. This is after having a drop in the 70% range in its Monday numbers, which again is in that kind of middling range there. Was not the best of drops off for your Monday. It's also not one of the worst, right? We've seen films drop in the 80% range before, but the fact remains right now, the projections for the weekend at least seem to be pretty darn strong. 56% hold being projected right now by Box Office Theory for a total of around $49 million, bringing its total domestic to 187.3. This also means the film will take the number one spot once again, even though it's coming up against some new releases. What is most interesting to me, though, is the fact that the new documentary film from the Daily Wire called Am I Racist is actually projected to get into the top 3 this weekend. And based off of these numbers, you could say, based on what we've seen in the past as far as the power of word of mouth and what could potentially happen, Am I Racist could actually even be in that battle for that second place spot. Now, still too early to say at this point. It's going to be a lot more limited because it's in a lot less theaters, but I do think that the per theater ratio for that movie will probably end up being a lot better than a lot of the other films on this list. But as of right now, Speak No Evil is right now expected to be a solid second place finish this weekend, even amidst all of the new releases. But again, it's amazing to me that a documentary by the Daily Wire is actually going to be beating out not only films that have been out for a while, but also even new releases like The Killer's Game from Lionsgate, which, let's be honest, did not look like a good film. The trailer looked pretty abysmal as well, but the fact that it's beating out a major Hollywood production, a major Hollywood film, is still definitely very impressive, no matter how you spin it. So we'll go over all of those numbers today, and I'll give some brief thoughts on the film Am I Racist by the very end of the video. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button over, and honestly smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure you are subscribed. Hit that bell. That way you get notified every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So Beetlejuice, $49 million. That is just, again, very impressive numbers there after a $111 million opening weekend domestically. This film is on a tear right now, at least when it comes to the domestic box office. It's going to get very, very close to its break even, in fact, by the end of this weekend, based off of where these numbers currently are. We'll look at the charting and see where the film is currently and probably when its break even point will be hit, looking probably in the next couple of weeks or so, but still very, very strong numbers here for the film, which in my opinion is a middling film. However, it seems that there is a lot of varying opinions, and there are definitely a lot of people out there that really enjoy the movie, and hey, can't take away from that subjective experience that people are having with the film. Speak No Evil is a movie that actually I have some interest in, just because I do think that James McAvoy has really, kind of found his niche when it comes to the roles that he portrays, because there's just something about him playing a crazy person, right? He just seems to be doing it very, very well. I actually have a ticket to go see this movie because, I like the psychological thrillers. I also like films that feature him, especially. The movie Split, for instance, I thought was a brilliant performance from him, and I think that this is going to be yet another one of those kinds of performances, being very, very creepy. This is Universal Blumhouse, so definitely in their wheelhouse. Projected to make around $12.4 million, and on a budget of being very, very little, yeah, this movie is expected to do pretty darn well, not just opening weekend, but long term. You're definitely looking at some profits very early on in its release. $12.4 million expected for its opening weekend. And then for the film Am I Racist, being released by SDG Releasing, but again, this is from the Daily Wire, $8.2 million in its opening. So again, this is very impressive numbers here. We think about all of the other films that have come out this year. We think about major Hollywood productions that have come out this year, especially those that are in the indie space, right? The fact that a documentary in this way is being released, making as much and making more than a lot of the other films that we have seen. Again, not just The Killer's Game this weekend, but think about comparing this up against some of those other films that we've been covering more recently. We'll go and see this in the charting as well. But yeah, this is just really darn impressive for this movie, and the sky's the limit as well for this movie, right? I've mentioned that before in regards to Deadpool Wolverine, but because this movie seems to be tracking higher and higher as more and more people find out about it, bring more people to it. And I think especially as the word gets out about how entertaining the film actually is, regardless of one's political opinion, I definitely do think that it's going to be one that's going to cause some conversation, which is, I think, a very important conversation for us to have, but also it's going to be able to allow for a lot of people to see a movie that typically they would not have access to. It's really nice for them to actually finally go from beyond the paywall of the Daily Wire, because that is a hard sell, I think, for most people, is to say, yeah, when you sign up for this conservative news website, you get access to this movie instead of having a theatrical release or having a physical media release. This, I think, is definitely the way to go. They made the film What is a Woman back a couple of years ago, which I thought personally was the most important film of our time, of our era, because of the subject matter that it dealt with. In this case, it deals with also a very important subject matter as well. And so I think that this is definitely a good move on their part, and seems like it'll be paying off for them. We have no budget on this movie yet, and it's probably not going to ever be released, if I had to imagine. Also, can't imagine that it cost a crazy amount of money, despite the fact they did spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get some of the people in the film to be interviewed, which is, again, hilarious to see. But with that being said, this movie expected to get the number 3 spot, and again, maybe have some contention for number 2, depending on how well it does. Again, if it was me betting, I would say Beetlejuice getting that number 1 spot, Speak No Evil getting the number 2, because I think a movie like that, right, that horror film that could also get some of that good word of mouth going, though I've definitely not heard the best things about the movie from people who have seen it early on. I hear James McAvoy is great, and that might be enough, though, to drive people out to the actual film. But am I racist in that category, in that discussion? No doubt about it. Number 4 spot expected to go to Deadpool Wolverine, expected to get to $621 million domestically. As I've mentioned previously, I think that, $650 is not completely off the table for this movie, though I do think that it'll probably peter out around $640-ish, but still, the movie is doing incredibly well, has easily made its money back, making a lot of profit as well, so definitely impressive numbers there. And then number 5 spot expected to go to Reagan, having another strong hold here, 33%. But as I've mentioned in previous videos before, I think that this film might not still have enough gas in the tank to get to its money back, at least in its theatrical release. But we've talked about how I do think that there's a potential for it to make its money back down the road. Going to another box office projection site, we have Box Office Pro, and very similar story here, right? So we have Beetlejuice projected to make around $40 to $60 million according to their metrics. So again, a very strong showing there. Obviously, a drop expected to be around 50% plus. And do I think that that's going to happen? Again, seems like the box office, so-called experts, in this case, the ones that I trust a bit more than the mainstream media experts, I definitely think that there's going to be a good chance for these numbers to hold as they are. Speak No Evil has a range of $15 to $20 million according to them, and again, sounds about right for me. What is interesting, though, is how they don't seem to have any acknowledgement whatsoever of the film Am I Racist? So their number 3 spot actually is going to The Killer's Game, which they are projecting to get $4 to $8 million. Even Box Office Report has Am I Racist in that number 3 spot and does not have the film anywhere close to the number 3 spot. So I do think you're getting a little bit of where these companies currently are, right? A film like Box Office Theory, Sean Robbins, I think that he's at least willing to be honest, right? This is obviously not an endorsement of any of the films on this list. He's just saying, hey, here's the numbers as they are, and I'm not going to try to spin it any other way. Box Office Pro just leaving it off the list completely, having that $4 to $8 million list there. I don't even think even mentioning the film. Let's do a Control F find. Am I racist? Maybe it'll be in the comment. See, there's one instance where it shows up, but it won't even. Oh, there it is. Oh boy. All right, so this is from the comments. Yeah, Killer's Game isn't going to make a dent. Sadly, though, I do think they are ignoring a new release that'll outperform it. I don't blame them, because I also want to ignore the existence of Matt Walsh's latest stale, self-indulgently hateful documentary, but I can't pretend Walsh's followers won't shell out for it. So wait, Leah, you're talking about this that you haven't even seen, and you're acting as if you know what it's going to be. Yeah, so you've just exposed yourself as being someone who has no idea what you're talking about, and also someone who clearly is ignorant of facts and reality. But hey, that is kind of the world that we live in today. Let's go to Box Office Report, though, because at least they are acknowledging the fact that there is a movie coming out this weekend that is going to get that number 3 spot, and it's not going to be Killer's Game. So anyway, Beetlejuice, $48 million for them. Speak No Evil, $12 million, and then Am I Racist, $7 million. So again, from at least a couple of these sites, we're seeing some consistent messaging here that that's probably going to be our 1, 2, 3 finish. But obviously, there is that potential for any of these films to do better or to do worse than the initial projections. Right now, it seems to me Box Office Theories makes the most sense, especially with, again, Am I Racist probably doing better than what a lot of people would expect it to do. It says right here, Matt Walsh and SDG's releasing Am I Racist has driven impressive activity in pre-sales during recent weeks. As it looks to capitalize on the current U.S. political election. Appeal will be strongest in conservative communities, but it could be a sleeper performer among the top films of the weekend. So again, this is not an endorsement that he is giving to it. He is just speaking for the numbers as they currently are. We need a lot more of this in modern Hollywood, and in this case, in modern box office coverage than anywhere else, right? Even if we don't like a movie, even if we have, any political biases towards a given film, we should still be honest about the numbers as they currently are, of which, of course, Box Office Pro is not doing right now. And then again, the range that they have for Speak No Evil is 10 to 15, with a 10 plus million being the traditional tracking expectations. And so, going to be interesting to see where that film also ends up by the end of the weekend as well. Let's go over to the chart because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. So as we see right here, Speak No Evil, there is a $15 million projected budget, expected to need around 37.5, probably 37 to 45 plus $1 million in order to break even. We could probably suspect that the film will get pretty close to that. We'll see it make a pretty big dent this weekend, and I do think it'll have enough gas in the tank to get to its break even and make a decent amount of profit to boot as well. When it comes to Am I Racist, all right, we don't have the numbers on that, so we don't have any budget being given. Hopefully, they release that. Maybe I can see if someone in our community who has contacts with them can maybe reach out and say, hey, could you maybe tell us what is the actual budget for this movie? Can you give us a ballpark example of this? Maybe talk about your marketing as well, right? Just to give us an idea of how successful the film actually is. I think having an opening weekend where you're getting into the top 3 as a documentary, as a conservative media's documentary, I think that is already impressive enough in the current landscape in which we are living. But again, that can only really happen if you are willing to share those kinds of numbers. And again, let's have some openness and transparency. That'd be awesome. It would definitely be a huge benefit for y'all to do that, I think. And we'll see what happens with that. Whereas Beetlejuice, right, as we can see, has been doing pretty well. But if it's domestic, gets to around 161, right, that means that the film will probably get closer to being around 30 million or so in the red at the end of this weekend. I suspect that by the end of its third weekend, maybe fourth, is when we'll see the film get to its break even, start to make some profit. And I do think it's going to still have a good chance of making a decent amount of profit for them. So, hey, that is definitely a win, no matter how one actually spins it. Some other updates here. We've got 1992 is still a massive flop. Afraid, probably not going to make its money back if I had to guess based on these numbers. Reagan, again, has maybe an outside chance to make its money back theatrically, but don't worry, I think the film will make its money back easily in the post-theatrical market. The Crow, $67 million flop. Blink Twice is an $11 million flop. Again, don't think that is going to change anytime soon. Alien Romulus continuing to add to its overall profits. Borderlands, still a massive $157 million flop. And then we've got It Ends With Us still adding overall to its money. Trap, still a flop. Deadpool Wolverine still making almost $300+ million domestically. Sorry, $300 million in total net gains profits. And so those are the numbers as they stand. The one other thing I want to talk about is this site, Movio, which actually does total U.S. statistics theatrically. And so to no one's surprise, of course, Beetlejuice dominated last weekend. But what I did find interesting was that when you go into the individual release, when it comes to Beetlejuice, 52% of the audience was actually female. So I do think that this definitely speaks to bringing in people like Jen Ortega into your audience, I think is driving out that audience, right? That female audience, that demographic that oftentimes does not show up to the same level as we see other films, right? Typically for a film like Beetlejuice, you would think, oh, it's a Michael Keaton film. It's going to drive out that male audience. But it turns out actually more women made up the audience. And I can speak to this myself in the local theater that I was at, that, yeah, it definitely seemed like there were a lot more female fans of Tim Burton there than there were male fans of Tim Burton. And again, I think Jen Ortega probably had a huge part to play in that industry. What was also interesting, and I mentioned this in a previous video or live stream, was I was interested to see, okay, what was the generational breakdown? And yeah, sure enough, the biggest part of this demographic was actually from Gen Y, was from the millennial audiences, right? And so if you actually go into, okay, that female audience to get a more specific number, right, 55% of the female audience that showed up was in Gen Y, 13% from Gen Z, and then only about 27% and only about 27% was present for the Gen X crowd. So even though this is a movie that was really made for that Gen X, I guess you could argue that this would have been out around the time of a lot of millennials, existence. I know for me, I did not see this film when it first came out, right? I didn't see this movie until a little bit later in life, when I was in probably my teens. And so, it makes some sense for millennials to be there, but I do think that millennial generation is going to be that generation that's much more drawn to the likes of someone like a Jenna Ortega, Gen Z, of course, being much more prominent in that. But yeah, can't say I'm all that surprised to see this type of breakdown. I am surprised by the fact that more women went to see the film than men, but yeah, that's very interesting, right? Most movies that come out are not seeing that, right? And again, just to show you an idea of these metrics and why these demographics are important is because, as I mentioned with the film Reagan, yeah, look at how much dominant it is amongst Gen X and baby boomers. As I mentioned, this is the crowd that's showing up for a movie like that, and they have not been showing up in vast numbers, and that's the reason why the film is not doing as well as it potentially could have. Whereas a film like Deadpool Wolverine has definitely seen, right, a much more dominantly male audience. Of course, this film has been out for a while, and so that's why you do see this. If you go back in time, it's going to be a lot more male dominated, but still able to drive out the audiences that it needs to make money. Beetlejuice is, again, driving out a similar audience, but making a lot more headway amongst millennials. And so I did want to mention that. But anyway, what are y'all's thoughts? Have you seen Am I Racist? Are you planning to see it this weekend? Again, for me, I gave it a rad score. I thought it was, again, a very solid movie. I do think that the film is not nearly as good as the film What Is a Woman? I thought that movie, honestly, was a lot more impactful, was a lot more effective. I thought that was actually the most important film to come out in our generation because it deals with a very, very important issue when it comes to the safety of our kids and the kind of nonsense that's being perpetuated onto them. And so it seemed to have that much more of a serious tone to it, and that's why I think it was actually a lot more effective, even though it was behind a paywall. They did eventually put it out for free on Twitter, on X, and the likes of Elon Musk were finally able to see it, and a bunch of other people, and I think that was also able to have, right, a very important impact. But again, what do you think about this fact that they are indeed going the theatrical route with this movie? I think that that's where this movie will probably end up shining, is the fact that it is going to have that much more of an impact, that much more of a reach, so that way it doesn't just go behind the paywall. Interestingly enough, though, it is going to be kind of interesting to see how the Daily Wire subscribers respond, because I know for me, I'm like, wait, why is it that we're not getting access to this movie as well at the same time? That seems a bit weird, and there's actually been no word whatsoever about when the film will get released in that way. And, again, it'll be interesting to see. Overall, again, I did think it was good. I thought it was not as good as the other film. And also, an hour 41 minutes for a documentary, even if it's a comedy, right? Even if they are playing it for laughs in many cases, and also exposing the nonsense of what is going on when it comes to the DEI community, I definitely do think that that's a bit of a long runtime, and I definitely felt it a couple times over the course of the movie, but it was also a ton of fun as well. Again, I think regardless of your political opinions, I think that you're still going to have a lot of fun with it because it is, again, it's just a very effective comedy. It's not even just that it's always conservative comedy. It's more of it's a very well done comedy. They are able to the deadpan, especially of someone like a Matt Walsh, is something that I think is going to be very impactful on a lot of people, regardless of political affiliation. And anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about that? Let me know your thoughts about this or anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. A lot of that fire button over at Aussie. Smash the rumble button. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Friday the 13th of all things. So yeah, watch some movies. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy, shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started, and also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed August, and as always, God bless.